Welcome, everybody. We're going to be looking at the solutions tonight for the two exercises in Unit 2. We had some basic spreadsheets that we were provided as part of the assignment. And as I said before the recording started, that when you're given a spreadsheet to work on, you don't need to recreate it from scratch. So some people were recreating these from scratch. The other goal is to try to make it both look the same, right? And so in other words, if the title is colored blue and it's a merged cell, you should try to do the same thing. And then wherever you see like totals dropped in, we're assuming that Excel is calculating those totals, that you're not doing it manually and then typing them in, or you're not pulling a calculator out, doing the math and, typing it in. One of the reasons we use Excel is because it's basically kind of a combination of like a sort of a programming tool, a fancy calculator, and an analysis tool kind of all wrapped into one. And it also has a little presentation capability built into it too, in the form of like you can make the stuff look nice and orderly and style it, rather than just working with really plain information. So the way that I'm going to do this is I'm just going to point out, right? So the instructions are basically use the attached spreadsheet. Now to get to it, of course, you click on the title of the assignment. We'll go there in a second. And then you'll format the rows and the columns. You'll make them look like this. I'm seeing stuff is bold. I don't know if you're catching these lines here. There's a underline and a double underline here, which is pretty standard for accounting stuff. This is formatted and merged. These are bold. I'm also noticing that the numbers that go over 1,000 here all have a comma in place. That's part of the formatting too. The same here and with the totals. The totals we're going to assume are calculated by Excel, and the percentages are calculated by Excel. So calculate totals for fall, spring, and summer, and a course total. Calculate summer as a percent of total. That one there, and I'm just going to say this, and I said it's for just about every assignment that I graded, that is subjective. A percent of the total of what is really kind of the question you should ask. So I did get a mix of answers, and I didn't mark it wrong if you didn't do it, and it looks like the spreadsheet here, because I think it's open to interpretation and therefore misinterpretation. But I'll show you the different approaches, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click through here, and I'm going to pull down the spreadsheet. And I'm going to open it. And this is how you should have received it, right? Because it's coming off of the internet and it's downloaded, you always get the enable editing button. And of course, if you don't click that, you can't do anything with it, right? So this might be one reason why some of you may have just created it from scratch. Once again, I'm going to discourage you from doing that. It's not necessary, right? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click enable editing. I am going to go full screen on this. I'm also going to zoom in just a little bit. Maybe one more click there. All right. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a save as, right? Because I want to have the original and left alone, right? And then I'll have a copy, which will be the solution. So I don't know if you guys have already done this, but I'm really big on file management. You should be organized with where you're putting your stuff. And what I've been doing is I create folders for all my classes, as you can see here. And then I create folders for my semesters. You might create folders for your units, right? And I do that inside here. So I would normally save that here. So I'm going to go ahead and just change the name. I'm going to say solved, right? And okay, so now I'm going to start working on it. So let's start with formatting stuff first, because I think that's actually a little bit easier. So the one thing I noticed from the example, right, is that big blue bar going across the top, and it goes across those 5 columns. I think I did have a couple of people that misinterpreted that as like that big blue column should go across the whole spreadsheet. That's not correct. We just want it over these columns, right? So that's the ideal. I can see why that would be misinterpreted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all the columns where we have information. I'm going to do a merge and center, right? Then I'm going to use the style gallery. This is how we were shown last week, right? And I'm just going to change this to this one here because it looks kind of like the example, right? Not too bad, pretty simple to do. Summer is a percent of total, also has the same stipulation. But before we get down there, let's take a look at this information. Do you notice that this is truncated? And I could manually drag it until it fits, right? So that's one approach, and that's fine if you did it that way. The other approach is to just double click and it will auto size. Now, do you guys notice what happened though? It made it bigger, and here's the why. This is actually in cell A1. So it made it as big as that is, which is bigger than all of these. So the manual approach is actually wiser here. So I'm just going to bring it back to about there. I'm also noticing that all the headers here are bold. Oh, and check it out. Course total isn't fitting either, right? So I could make that one bigger, but then here's what happens. These now all look uneven to me. Maybe that's not so good either, right? And this is very, particular kind of stuff. But I might highlight all four of those columns and then do a double click. Okay, well, they're still not even. I mean, it fits nicer, but they're still not even. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make it manually a little bit wider until course total fits. And to me, that looks better. Let's look at the example now. Sort of what they did. What else did they do here? And this is one of those things where you got to pay really close attention, by the way. Fall, spring, and summer, and I assume course total are all centered in the box. Course name and all the courses are not. So I'm going to highlight all four of those, and then I'm going to use the layout tools here, right? And I'm just going to center, right? So it just puts it in the center of the cell. Okay. All of the course names and the semester total are all bold as well. And then this entry here, that's also merged and centered, and it has some sort of style on it. I don't know if it's exactly the same as the other one. I don't think so. Yeah, it's a slightly different blue. It's left aligned and it's black text. All right, so I could left align that as black text. I'm not sure if that looks good or not, but that's what the author did. All right. Next thing is, I'm noticing that in the bottom here, we have a reiteration of all the courses. So all the courses that were listed here, and there's what, 6 or 7 of them, are also listed here. So I'm just going to copy paste those. So here's the course names. And they're pasted. I do want you to notice, is there one extra one here that we're not seeing on the spreadsheet? Yeah, some people caught it, some people did not. Which one is it? It's world history right above American history. So I'm going to right click here on the row, and then I'm going to choose insert. That's the way I like to do it, and it's a matter of getting used to it. So we'll type in world history. So we're adding information, and you know what, if I'm adding it here, I better copy that, and then I could insert another row here, or notice what I'm doing is I'm highlighting all 3 boxes and just dragging them down. That's fine. There's no data associated with it off to the right to break. Now I'm going to paste world history, but it looks like I have to copy it again. All right. And this is kind of a weird thing about Excel and something you should pick up on. I copied this cell, and you notice what happened when I hit Control C? It's got like the little dashed lines are kind of like moving around like a marquee around it, meaning it's still in my buffer. So anywhere I go on my spreadsheet and I paste, it's going to still be there. And as long as that is still active, that's in my copy paste buffer. It's in memory waiting to be pasted. The moment that goes away, and you notice when I inserted a row or moved content, that went away for whatever reason. That's how Excel works. That stops. Now, the other way to make it stop is you press escape. That stops the copy paste is now canceled. Can I still paste it? Doesn't work now. So that's kind of a helpful thing. Now, some of these numbers, 688, 549, 372, we're going to have to manually enter those because those aren't based on a formula. So 688, 549, and the other one was 372. So you're assuming somebody is hard coding these, they're getting them from a report, or it's coming off of a database. All right. All right, so we added all those values in, and we have all the information that we need now to start running some formulas, and then we can do some additional formatting at the end. The first thing that I'm going to point out is that these totals, right, and this is very similar to the example we did last week, right? We're assuming that this, and this add up to that. Let's put a sum here and see if that works. Now, the way I would prefer that you do this is you type equals sum, parentheses, highlight your cells, close your parentheses, and press enter. That's how I prefer that you do it. Why? Because it's easier, real frankly. Okay, granted, this is only 3 cells, but if it was 20 cells, it would be just as fast, right? The other way to accomplish it, and some of you did it this way, and I didn't downgrade for this. You might have said, well, it equals B4 plus C4 plus, oops, nope, not D5, D4, and then you press enter. You still get the same value. Is there mathematically a difference? No, there's not. But I think the sum approach is the preferred approach, right? And you notice how I did that? I clicked with my mouse, click and drag, and I entered it in. Because this calculation will be the same for all of these rows, I can click on there and just simply drag it down. And I can drag it down even one more, even though these calculations are not here yet. But they're ready to calculate. All right. In the bottom row here, we have to do a sum, but we'll do it in the other direction. So we're going to do a horizontal one. Still start with equals sum, open parens. I just copy the whole column, right? It's not copying it. I'm selecting the whole column with my mouse, and then closing the parenthesis and pressing enter, right? And then we can drag across. And then, okay, so here's an argument. Should this sum be the row across, or should it be the row above or the column above? All right. Well, I just want to show you both calculations are exactly the same. How do I know this? Whenever I highlight a group of numbers inside of Excel, I want you guys to look down here in your bottom, I don't know what they call this, like a task area or something, right by the zoom control. But you'll notice if I just highlight numbers, it automatically has their sum. Do you notice how the sums are the same? Pretty slick, right? I know that's very small to see. It also counts how many things are there and gives you an average. And that's just built into Excel. It just does that automatically, by the way. Pretty slick. Right. So, for example, if I want to verify this calculation, all I have to do is highlight those 3 and look, 25, 26, 25, 26, very good. Isn't that handy? That's really, really handy, right? And if you go the other direction, once again, 59, 65, 59, 65, it all matches up. All right. Now, I noticed, remember the formatting things, the first thing I noticed is everything in the upper table all has commas when it exceeds 1,000. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all those values. I'm going to go up to this formatting tool up here. You notice the little comma? I'm just going to click it. Oh, but it added zeros like it's money, but it's not money, right? So I can't have like 0.00 students. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the decrease decimal tool to remove the zeros. Any number over 1,000 includes a comma now. Any number under, that's not relevant. All right, another formatting thing is the bottom row, right, is bolded and it has accounting styling added to it. And I don't know if you guys are are familiar with that, but there's a thing that accountants do is when they're about to total something, they usually put a line in their thing. And then when it's the bottom line, they put a double line at the bottom. And that's really hard to see in the graphic here. So I apologize for that, but I will show you how to do that in Excel. The first thing we'll do is we'll bold this. So those are all bolded. And then we have this borders tool button here, and it's right in the same area with the font, by the way. And you notice that built into it is an underline, right? So like the default action is you put an underline in, and if I click off of it, you see the underline. Okay, that's not exactly what I want. So some of you might go, well, yeah, but that would work for this row. If I could put an underline underneath this one, yeah, you can do that. But Excel, being kind of the cool product that it is, doing a top and bottom border is built in. So a top border and a thick bottom border, that's pretty standard, like I said, accounting technique, and there it is. All right, so that mimics what you see. Now I know the one in the one that we were looking at is also green. If you want, you can actually go in there and color them. I'm not really too concerned about that. Now, if I was making this table, real frankly, first of all, I would fix that so I could see intro to computers, right? And then is semester total underlined? No, it's not. See, I personally, I would probably put a underline here. And you notice how you have a whole palette of like kind of standard formatting stuff that you can do. I would probably typically put an underline underneath, but that's very subjective, right? You weren't asked to do that. The other thing that I'm noticing here is that they do have a separate one for a top and double bottom border, which is really what accounting does. So I'm just going to zoom in on that so you can see it. I still don't know if you can see it or not. Yeah, boy. Zooming in doesn't actually help, but it's two really thin lines put together. All right, so I'm going to zoom back out. All right, so that's one aspect of this. Now, this little title here, I'm going to go ahead and make this one bold. I think it looks a little better that way. Maybe I should make this one bold too. In fact, maybe I could make that one a little bit bigger. It's 11 right now. We could make it 12. I'm not sure if that makes much of a difference, but there you go. All right. The last task, and this is how it was defined in the assignment, is to calculate summer as a percent of total. And this is where I have a little issue with the wording, and I'm probably gonna have to change it for next time around. I didn't notice it, but they have a very clear implication here. So you notice that the calculated amount is 16.4%, right? So what we're looking for is the numbers for algebra from the summer, which would be 415, and some interpreted it as a percentage of the course total for the year. Some interpreted it as a percentage of the grand total, and some interpreted it as a percentage of the semester total. I could see that all three of those could be interpreted as correct, right? So regardless of which approach you used, I was okay with it, right? As long as your calculations were consistent all the way through. And really, I would probably say arguably that summer as a percent of total, to me, really means probably relative to the whole semester. That's how I would interpret it. Or the course total, preferably. And I think the percentage actually works out to be those two divided. So these numbers might vary for you, and just keep in mind, I didn't mark them wrong. But to get that 16.4%, we're going to come in here and we're going to calculate a percentage. So we're going to take that summer total, and one approach was to divide it by the course total, right? And there's the 16.4%. And of course, if I format it as a percentage and increase the decimal, it works out the same. And because this calculation would be the same going all the way down the table, I can just grab the little square in the corner. And then if you look at the percentages here, that's how they got this. Right. So it really should say summer as a percent of the yearly total for that course is really what it should say. And if you guys want to watch me kind of edit this, because I'm going to edit it right now. Summer as a percent of the course total for the year. That's more clear and precise. So I'm just going to update that. Now, if you did it the other ways, like I said, I didn't downgrade you, and I made a little comment saying, hey, it's open to interpretation. That's fine. Now, I think, and I'm going to do this in a separate column, by the way, that I think when I read it the original way, the way that it really resonated with me was this as a percentage of the total for the year, right? So, and the way I would write that one would be equals this divided by that value. This value should never shift. So if I copied, pasted this formula down, it would like refer to different cells. So on this value, here's a little magic key here. If you press your F4 key, let's see if I can press my F4 key there. Oops, of course I broke it. Sorry. Frustrating. All right, so let's do that calculation again. Divided by this, and while I'm still on this character, I press F4, and that puts the dollar signs in to lock the position. So that way, when I pull this formula down, all of these formulas refer to this cell, but the relative position for each one of the courses moves. So, right, this one stays locked in position with the dollar signs, the row and the column. This one moves with the drag down. Now this is coming out as like very different percentages, but we can switch it to percentages, and then we can increase it. And you can see you have a much different output here when you do it this way. Some people did the same thing, but use this as the divisor. That's very subjective. I'm going to call this approach the correct one because that's what the screen output showed. If you did one of the other ways, you did not get downgraded. So I'm going to call this one done and complete. All right, so that's exercise 1 from unit 2. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to save that and close it. All right, so going to the next exercise. All right, so here we have a time card, right? And this is not an unusual thing, right? So like even here at Gateway, sometimes we get forms to fill out, and instead of, nobody sending paper around anymore. Sometimes we're sent forms in Excel or Word or whatever, but Excel is very common that where we have to fill out information that's not too dissimilar from this. And you notice there's a spot where you can type in name, address, phone numbers, etc. And then there's dates, hours, etc. Dates arguably could be done with a formula. At this point, I would not suspect that any of you did that. I think one person did that out of whoever turned it in. Because you notice up here, we say week ending a certain date, and then you could calculate these dates based upon that, right? And you can use, there's formulas for doing that. The hours somebody worked, well, if we were at like a big company, there's like probably a clock, right, where you might have to clock in, and that might automatically feed the system. But otherwise, you might just literally write it down or manually enter it. Like, yeah, they were here all day. They're good, right? You type in 8 hours, and then if there was overtime, and then of course the total number of hours. This should not be hard coded either. This should be formulas. This should be a formula, formula, rate per hour. That should be hard coded. The overtime rate could be hard coded or a formula. I would recommend a formula. Right. So that's really what you should have been entering. All right, let's go ahead and download this one. Once again, I'm going to open it up. I'm going to enable editing. All right, sit up straight to type this in now. But I would hope that you type somebody's name. If you want to type your own, that's fine, right? You can put in a address if you wish. Not that I'm really checking. And let's say the week ending, well, today is Monday, the third. I mean, you can put in whatever dates you want. If you were mimicking what was on the screen, which some people did, Sunday was the second, right? So 2-225. And actually, this is kind of weird, right? So if I looked at a calendar, and I'm just going to do this, I'm trying to find a quick and easy way to do this. So just bear with me here without getting too much personal information on the screen. All right. And I'm going to go into month view here, right? So, all right, so we were in January going into February is where we were at, right? So February 1st was the Saturday, February 2nd was the Sunday, but really the first, day of the week, in terms of working and getting a paycheck is the 27th of January. So I'm going to show you a couple of techniques here, but this is how I would do it, and for whatever that's worth. I would put in the first date, I would put in the second date, and notice I'm only typing 25, not 2025. And then if you have a pattern and you highlight two of them, you can actually drag it down. And you notice like the little pop-up that comes up, it automatically types out the rest of the dates for me, whether or not I work them. But there you go. That's probably the easiest way to do it. You can also write formulas that say date plus one, for example, or date plus two, date plus three. I think that's kind of not very useful, honestly. These are hard-coded values here, and I don't think that's the important part of the exercise. What we did see, though, is that this person, let's just get that out of the way, worked 8 hours Monday through Friday. Thursday, they did 2 hours overtime, and Friday, they did 3 hours overtime. So I'm going to type those in. And you'll notice that the sheet's already set up to display decimal numbers, right? Oh, they did not work on Saturday, so we just leave those blank, right? I think 2 hours overtime and 3 hours overtime. So 2 hours, 3 hours. Now you notice this one's got a formula in it already. Okay, you know what? Do I need to type the formula for this one? I'm just going to have you just be clever on this. This is like the kind of stuff you start figuring out with spreadsheets. Like, well, this formula is already working and I can click up here and see what it's adding. Well, I need to do the same thing over here. So why don't I just take the box and drag it this way? And it added up my 40 hours. Very nice. And by the way, if they happen to take sick time or vacation time, right? Or if we're totaling the totals, all of those formulas will go all the way across. And now nothing happened here, but I do want you to notice that there are formulas in these boxes and they're just sums, right? The other thing that we want to do is over here in the totals column is we do want a sum of everything in the row, right? Even though these are blank, we're going to still total them. And then we're just going to bring all those formulas down. All right, this is giving me a little warning here. I'm not really quite sure why. Probably because there's no information here. Regardless. Okay, so these are now showing the right amounts, and notice how it all matches up. All right, few more pieces to figure out here. One would be the total pay. So the total pay is what? The number of hours you worked times your hourly rate. So in this box, we'll just do that calculation. We'll say equals this box multiplied by this one. And there it is, $1,000. Now, overtime, for most people, overtime is time and a half, right? So like 50% more than you normally would be paid. So what I could do is I can do that as a formula. So you could calculate it and then type it in. I guess I wouldn't care too much about that, but I would prefer that you do the formula. And so what we would do is we take the hourly rate and then multiply it by 1.5, right? So that should give you 37.50. Then we need to multiply these two together to get how much overtime pay there was. Well, I already have that calculation. I'm just going to drag it over. That's 187.50. And really, there's these calculations too. They're not active right now. We don't know what these rates are. I might argue, and I don't think they fill them in here, but that your sick time and your vacation time probably deducts at your standardly hourly rate. I don't know how places work, or people just detract the hours and don't count the pay. Hard to say. Finally, down here, we need to get a total for what was earned. How do you get that total? Well, you would add all of these together. So we're going to just say equals sum. We're going to drag across. Some people might just grab the first two. That'll work too. It'll give you the right amount. And there's our total. Now, ideally, you would fill in all these pieces of information up here, pretending like you're really working with a real human. Something like that. All right, there's your timesheet, and that's it. All right. So that's the solution for exercise 2. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here.